You need to leave, Marshall. This is my house now, and I don't want you here anymore." Vanessa stood in my kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, looking at me like I was something she needed to scrape off the bottom of her shoe. 1 hour. That's how long she'd waited after we buried my son Terrence before telling me to get out. I was still wearing my black funeral suit, still had cemetery dirt on my dress shoes from where I'd stood at my boy's grave. The funeral program sat on the counter next to me, Terrence's smile frozen in that photo from last Christmas. And here was his wife, this woman who'd married him 3 years ago, already erasing me from the home where I'd raised him. My hands shook as I held my coffee cup, the chipped blue mug Terrence made me in middle school pottery class. I could still smell his cologne in the hallway from 2 weeks ago, the last time he'd visited before the heart attack took him at 34 years old. "Vanessa, can we please talk about this tomorrow?" My voice barely held steady. "I just buried my only child." She laughed. Actually laughed. The coldest sound I'd ever heard. "There's nothing to talk about. Terrence left everything to me, the house, the car, his life insurance, all of it. You've been living here rent-free long enough. I'm giving you 1 hour to pack whatever you can carry and leave." I looked at this 26-year-old woman in designer jeans that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. She'd barely spoken to me at the funeral, spent the entire service texting on her phone, hadn't shed one tear while I sobbed over my son's casket. She thought she knew everything about me, thought I was just some poor old black man with nowhere to go. What she didn't know, what nobody knew, was the secret I'd been keeping for 32 years. Papers I'd signed in a lawyer's office downtown while Terrence was still in elementary school. But standing there, looking at her smug face, I decided to let her have her little victory. Sometimes the best revenge is patience. I checked my watch, force of habit. Vanessa's eyes flickered to it for a second, but she didn't really see it. Never had in 3 years. Just an old man's watch to her. She had no idea I was looking at an Omega Seamaster worth $8,000, a gift I'd bought myself 15 years ago when a commercial property deal closed. Terrence had asked about it once. I'd told him it was a knockoff from a pawn shop. He'd believe me because he wanted to. Through the window behind her, I could see a cherry-red Ford F-150 parked down the street. Dion's truck. The same man I'd seen her kissing in the garage 2 weeks before my son died. She thought I didn't notice, thought I was just a foolish old man who didn't pay attention. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked quietly. "That's not my problem anymore, is it?" She glanced at her phone. "There's assisted living places all over Richmond. I'm sure you'll figure something out." I set down the coffee mug carefully. 30 years of memories in this house on Sycamore Avenue. Every room held pieces of Terrence growing up. His first steps, his birthday parties, late nights helping him with homework at the kitchen table. "You're really doing this today?" "The sooner you leave, the sooner I can start fresh. Dion's moving in next week and I need space for his things." Dion, moving into my son's house before the flowers on the grave even wilted. "1 hour," she repeated. "And Marshall, don't take anything that's not yours. The furniture, the tools in the shed, the lawn equipment, all of that stays. It came with the house." The tools in the shed. I almost smiled at that. She'd locked me out of that shed on Wednesday thinking she was protecting her property. Had no idea she'd locked away $15,000 worth of professional-grade equipment. Hilti drills, Festool sanders, laser levels. The kind of tools you accumulate over 40 years when you're not just fixing leaky pipes, but overseeing major construction and renovation projects. But she saw an old man in work clothes and assumed the tools were from Harbor Freight. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my funeral suit. "1 hour, you said?" "That's what I said." I walked past her without another word. Didn't argue, didn't plead. Just gave her a small smile that seemed to confuse her for a second. What she didn't know was that smile meant something. Meant she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. If you've ever been underestimated, you want to see what happens next. Subscribe before this gets wild. I went upstairs and packed 2 suitcases in my duffel bag, took my clothes, my photos of Terrence, his pottery mug, and the few things that mattered. Left behind 3 decades of my life in that house like they meant nothing. In the closet, I grabbed a leather portfolio case she probably assumed was full of old tax returns. Inside were property deeds, business documents, and letters from commercial tenants, evidence of a life she'd never bothered to discover. I'd kept them here as a backup, never imagining I'd need them to prove ownership of my own property. Vanessa watched from the front door as I loaded my bags into my 1997 Honda Civic. She was already on her phone, probably texting Dion that the old man was finally gone. I climbed into my beat-up car, dented bumper, faded paint, the kind of vehicle that screamed broke to anyone who saw it. The same car Terrence had learned to drive in. The same car I'd kept for 17 years because it ran perfectly and I'd never seen the point in replacing something that worked. Started the engine and drove away from Sycamore Avenue without looking back. She assumed I'd end up in some rundown motel. Thought I'd be begging church friends for a couch to sleep on. That was her first mistake. Because what Vanessa didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the beat-up Honda wasn't all I owned. The Walmart clothes weren't my only wardrobe, and the poor handyman she just kicked out? He was about to teach her a lesson about assumptions that she'd remember for the rest of her life.
"Marshall, where are you headed?" The voice came through my car speakers, hands-free calling from Gladys Thompson, my neighbor from Sycamore Avenue. She must have seen me loading up the Honda. "Just driving, Gladys. Need to clear my head." "That woman kicked you out, didn't she? 1 hour after the funeral. I saw the whole thing from my window." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, watching Richmond roll past. That park where I'd taught Terrence to throw a football. The elementary school where I'd walked him on his first day, his small hand gripping mine so tight I could still feel it 32 years later. "She did what she thought was right," I said carefully. "Right, Marshall, that girl's got no decency. You raised that boy in that house. She got no business." "Gladys, I appreciate you calling, but I need to go." "Where you stand tonight? You need a place? My spare room's yours if—" "I'm fine, really. Thank you." I hung up before she could press further. Good woman, Gladys. Known her 30 years, but she didn't understand the full picture. Nobody did. My phone kept buzzing. Text messages from church friends offering spare rooms, couches, prayers. People who thought I had nowhere to go. Every street corner held ghosts. Terrence at 7 with chicken pox. Terrence at 16 learning to drive this same beat-up Honda. Terrence at 25 telling me he'd met someone special named Vanessa. I should have seen it then. The way she looked at our simple Sunday dinners. The way her eyes scanned our small living room like she was calculating its worth. The way she smiled at Terrence but barely acknowledged me. She'd seen my Walmart clothes and decided I was poor. Saw my old car and decided I was nobody. Made her choice about who Marshall Monroe was within 5 minutes of meeting me. That was 3 years ago. She had 3 years to ask questions, to wonder how a broke handyman never seemed stressed about money, never asked Terrence for help with bills, never complained about expenses. She never asked because she didn't want to know. The story in her head was easier. The West End neighborhood appeared ahead, big colonial houses with wraparound porches, professionally maintained lawns, historical markers dating back to the 1800s. I pulled into the driveway of a 3-bedroom colonial with freshly painted shutters, flower beds the landscaping service kept perfect, used my key, and walked inside. This was where I actually lived. The house I'd bought with cash in 2009, hardwood floors gleaming, furniture I'd picked myself, photos of Terrence covering every wall. The house on Sycamore Avenue? Just my rental property, one of 12 I owned across Richmond. My phone rang again. Patricia Whitmore, my attorney for 25 years. "Marshall, I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Pat." I sat at my mahogany desk, looking at diplomas she'd never seen. Awards Vanessa never knew existed. "Actually, I need you to set up a meeting." "What kind of meeting?" "A will reading. Friday afternoon." I looked at Terrence's college graduation photo on my desk. "And Patricia? I want everyone there." Silence. She knew me well enough to hear what I wasn't saying. "You're sure? We can handle this quietly." "No." I thought about Vanessa's cold laugh about my son's funeral program sitting on a counter in a house she thought she owned. I want her to understand exactly what she's done. I want witnesses. "Who do you want there?" I gave her the list. Neighbors, Terrence's best friend Marcus, my property manager, bank representatives, commercial tenants who'd met Terrence without knowing they paid rent to his father. "That's quite an audience," Patricia said carefully. "She kicked me out of my own house 1 hour after I buried my son. She deserves an audience when she learns the truth." After we hung up, I walked through my real home, the one nobody knew about, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Grief, rage, the exhaustion of losing the only person who'd ever mattered. But underneath all that was something cold and patient. Vanessa thought she'd won, thought she'd cleared the obstacle between her and Terrence's money. Friday, she'd learned different.
"Marshall, are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Patricia's voice carried concern through the phone. I sat in my home office Wednesday evening, surrounded by evidence of a life Vanessa never bothered to discover. "I'm sure, Pat. Friday at 2. Can you make it happen?" "I can, but we could handle this quietly. She'll be out in 30 days regardless. Standard eviction procedure. Why make it a spectacle?" I looked at the framed photograph on my desk. Caroline, my wife, holding baby Terrence in 1990. 2 years before the cancer took her. 2 years before everything changed. Because she laughed at me, Patricia, while I was still wearing my funeral suit. She laughed. Silence on her end. She understood. "Tell me who you want there." I gave her names. Gladys Thompson, the neighbor who'd watched Terrence grow up. Marcus Washington, his best friend since elementary school. Janet Reeves from First Capital Bank. Keisha Brown, my property manager. 2 commercial tenants from my downtown building. "That's a lot of witnesses for a simple will reading," Patricia said carefully. "Good. I want everyone to see exactly who Marshall Monroe really is." After we hung up, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside were files I hadn't looked at in years. Property deeds, business formation documents, tax returns showing income most people couldn't imagine. The first document was dated March 1992, 1 month after Caroline died. I'd been 33 years old with a 2-year-old son and $12,000 from Caroline's life insurance policy. The hospital had taken most of it for her final weeks of care. What remained barely covered the funeral. I remembered sitting at our kitchen table, the tiny apartment on Chamberlain Avenue where we'd struggled to make rent, with Terrence asleep in the next room. Calculator in front of me. $17 in my wallet until Friday's construction paycheck. Caroline's death taught me something that night. I never wanted to be financially helpless again. Never wanted my son to watch me struggle the way he'd watched us struggle during those final months. So I'd taken that $12,000 and made a choice. There was a duplex for sale in Churchill. The neighborhood was rough then, before the renovation wave, before the coffee shops and boutiques. The property was vacant 2 years. Broken windows, caved-in porch, rats in the basement. The seller wanted $8,000. I offered $7,000. He took it. I spent 3 months fixing that duplex myself after my construction shifts. Learned plumbing from library books. Taught myself electrical work from manuals I checked out. Replaced every window. Rebuilt the porch. Trapped every rat. By month 4, both units were rented. $1,400 a month in income from a property I'd bought for $7,000. Then I used that income to buy another property. fixed it up, rented it out, bought another. By the time Terrence graduated high school in 2008, I owned 6 rental properties across Richmond. By the time he got married in 2021, I owned 12 residential properties, 2 commercial buildings downtown, and a storage facility on Jefferson Davis Highway. My monthly rental income was close to $18,000. My net worth hovered around $4.7 million. But I'd kept it all quiet, used LLCs and trusts, property management companies, kept my name off public records where curious people might find it. I'd driven the same beat-up Honda since 2003, shopped at the same Walmart, lived like a man making $40,000 a year instead of someone earning that much every month. "Why'd you do it, Dad?" Terrence had asked me that once, about a year before he died. We'd been watching football and he'd noticed I never seemed worried about money. "Do what?" "Live so simple. You're always calm about bills, never stressed. It's like money doesn't even concern you." I almost told him then, almost explained everything. But I'd wanted him to build his own success, earn his achievements without his father's money smoothing the path. "Your grandfather taught me something," I'd said instead. "Real wealth whispers, while poverty shouts." He'd nodded like he understood, but he hadn't. Not really. Now, he never would. I closed the files and locked the drawer. Tomorrow I'd gather more documentation, bank statements, property records, 27 years of carefully maintained evidence. But tonight, I let myself remember what all of this had been for. Every property purchased, every tenant managed, every dollar saved and invested. It had been for Terrence, to build something that would outlast me, to create security he'd never have to worry about. And Vanessa thought she could take it with 1 hour's notice and a cruel laugh. Friday, she'd learn what happens when you underestimate a man who'd spent 40 years building an empire in silence.
"Mr. Monroe, we've got a problem with the joint account." Janet Reeves from First Capital Bank had called me in February, 11 months before Terrence died. Her voice carried the careful tone bankers use when they've discovered something ugly. "What kind of problem, Janet?" "3 credit cards open in your son's name. Total balance of $23,000. The applications came through our system, but the signatures don't match his account paperwork." My hand had tightened on the phone. "You're saying someone forged his signature?" "I'm saying the signatures are different enough to raise flags, and the billing addresses all route to a P.O. box registered to Vanessa Monroe." That's when I'd started paying attention. Really paying attention. I'd noticed small things before. Money disappearing from Terrence's account. 500 here, 200 there. Small enough not to trigger immediate alarm. But $23,000 in fraudulent credit cards? That was different. "Does Terrence know?" I asked Janet. "He found out yesterday. Came in asking questions. I showed him the documentation." That night, Terrence had shown up at my real house, the one in West End. He'd been to this house before, thought it belonged to a friend of mine who let me use the office sometimes. Never questioned it because he'd never seen me as someone who owned property like this. "Dad, we need to talk." He'd sat at my kitchen table looking exhausted, defeated, like the weight of his marriage was crushing him. "Vanessa's been taking money, a lot of money. I confronted her about the credit cards and she cried. Said she was embarrassed, said she wanted to surprise me with home improvements, a new deck, new furniture. Said she made a mistake, but it won't happen again." I'd wanted to tell him the truth then, about the houses I owned, the money I had, the resources that could help him leave if he needed to. But I'd stayed quiet, let him make his own choices. "What are you going to do?" I'd asked him. "I love her, Dad. I have to believe she'll change." That was February. By March, there were other signs. The boyfriend's truck, cherry red Ford F-150, started appearing on our street. First parked 3 houses down, then in the alley behind the Sycamore property. Then in late September, I'd caught them in the garage,
Vanessa and a man I'd later learned was named Dion pressed against the workbench, kissing like teenagers. They hadn't seen me. I'd left quietly, my heart breaking for my son. But I hadn't told him. I'd convinced myself I needed proof, needed to be certain, needed to handle it delicately. That decision haunts me every single day. Then there was the life insurance. In April, 6 months before Terrence died, Vanessa had convinced him to increase his policy from $100,000 to $500,000. "We need to be responsible," she told him over dinner one Sunday. I'd been there, watching her performance. What if something happens to you? I need to be protected. Terrence was 34 and healthy. Why would he need $500,000 in coverage? But he signed the papers because he loved her, because he wanted to believe she cared about their future together. By summer, he'd started complaining about feeling wrong. Tired all the time, dizzy, weak. His hands would shake for no reason, headaches that wouldn't quit. "Maybe you should see a doctor," I'd suggested in August. "Vanessa thinks it's stress. She's been making me these protein shakes every morning, says they'll help build my strength back up." Those protein shakes, every morning, like clockwork. The heart attack came October 1st, Tuesday morning. He'd collapsed in the bathroom getting ready for work. Vanessa called 911, but by the time paramedics arrived, he was gone. "Sudden cardiac arrest," they said. "Happens sometimes to young men with undiagnosed conditions." But Terrence didn't have a heart condition. He'd had a physical in June. Perfect blood work, strong heart, clean bill of health. The timing felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. And now, sitting in my office Wednesday night, I knew exactly what Friday's will reading would be about. Not just money, not just property. Justice.
Patricia, I need you to invite some specific people to Friday's reading. Thursday morning, I sat in my home office making the final preparations. Patricia had her legal pad out, taking notes. "Go ahead. Who do you want there?" "Gladys Thompson. Lives next door to the Sycamore property. She's watched Terrence grow up since he was born, seen everything Vanessa's done this past week." Patricia wrote it down. "Okay, who else?" "Marcus Washington, Terrence's best friend since 3rd grade. He knows about the credit cards, the money transfers, everything. He was there when Terrence changed his life insurance beneficiary back in January. Good witness. Continue." "Janet Reeves from First Capital Bank. She's handled my business account since 1995. She can speak to my financial history with documentation. She'll bring the full portfolio summary? Everything. Assets, holdings, transaction history going back 30 years. Patricia looked up from her notes. "Marshall, when you show her those numbers, it's going to be quite a shock." "That's the point." I handed her another list. "Keisha Brown, my property manager. She's been managing my rental portfolio for 10 years, has every lease agreement, every payment record, every maintenance log. And the commercial tenants. The coffee shop owner on East Broad, the boutique manager 2 doors down. Terrence helped me with maintenance at both locations over the years. Met them multiple times. Never realized they were paying rent to his father." Patricia shook her head slowly. "You've been hiding in plain sight for decades. My father taught me that. Real wealth doesn't announce itself." She added the names to her list. "Anyone else?" I thought about it. "Can you get someone from Richmond PD? Someone who handles fraud cases? You think the police will be interested? $23,000 in credit card fraud, $18,000 in unauthorized transfers, a suspiciously timed life insurance increase, a healthy 34-year-old who suddenly develops heart problems and dies 6 months later?" I met her eyes. "Yes, I think they'll be interested." Patricia set down her pen. "Marshall, you're not just evicting her. You're building a criminal case. I'm building a case for justice. There's a difference. What if the toxicology comes back clean? Then I'm wrong, and I'll apologize to Terrence's memory for doubting his wife. But if I'm right..." I didn't need to finish. Patricia understood. She gathered her papers. "I'll send formal invitations this afternoon. Everyone will be there by 2 o'clock Friday." After she left, I went to my closet and pulled out the navy Brooks Brothers suit I'd bought last week. Had it tailored at a downtown shop, cost $1,800, more than most people spent on a month's rent. I'd never worn anything this expensive around Terrence. Never wanted him to question why his broke father owned clothes like this. But Friday, Vanessa would see exactly who Marshall Monroe really was. I spent Thursday afternoon gathering documents, property deeds going back to 1997, tax returns showing income that climbed from thousands to millions over 40 years, business formation papers for the LLCs I'd created to keep my name off public records, bank statements showing $18,000 in monthly rental income, investment account summaries totaling $4.7 million in liquid assets, letters from commercial tenants thanking me for fair lease terms and professional property management. Evidence of a life Vanessa never bothered to discover because she decided within 5 minutes of meeting me that I was nobody worth knowing. My phone buzzed. "Marcus, Uncle Marshall, Patricia called. Said you want me at the will reading tomorrow." "I do. You're the one person who knew what Vanessa was doing to Terrence. I need you there. She's going to be furious when she sees all of us. Let her be furious. She kicked me out of my own house. Time she learned what that house actually is." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Terrence would be proud of you, standing up for yourself like this. Terrence would be alive if I'd stood up for him sooner. Don't do that to yourself. You didn't know. But that was the thing. I had known, or at least suspected, and I'd stayed quiet because I'd wanted Terrence to make his own choices. That silence might have cost him his life. I'll see you tomorrow, Marcus. 2 o'clock. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. October weather in Richmond, the kind of day that makes you think about endings rather than beginnings. I dressed in my Brooks Brothers suit, knotted my silk tie, looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone Vanessa wouldn't recognize. Not the broke handyman in Walmart clothes, not the helpless old man she'd laughed at. Someone who'd spent 40 years building an empire in silence. Someone who knew exactly how to wait for the right moment.
What is all this? Who are these people? Vanessa stood in the doorway of Patricia's conference room Friday afternoon, staring at the crowd inside. She was 20 minutes late, wearing a tight red dress completely wrong for a will reading. Dion stood behind her in a leather jacket and gold chains, looking like he was playing dress-up. Patricia glanced up from her papers. "These are the relevant parties for today's proceedings. Please, have a seat." Relevant parties? This is supposed to be a simple will reading, not a town hall meeting. But she sat down anyway, Dion beside her. They took seats at the far end of the mahogany conference table, as far from me as possible. Patricia's office was in one of those converted mansions on Monument Avenue. Marble fireplaces from 1867, crown molding installed by hand, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound law books that probably cost more than most people's cars. I'd arrived 30 minutes early, watching everyone filter in. Gladys in her church clothes, looking nervous but excited. Marcus in a suit and tie, jaw tight with anger. Janet Reeves from the bank with her briefcase full of financial documents. Keisha Brown with a rolling cart stacked with property management binders. The commercial tenants sat together looking confused about why they'd been invited. They'd figure it out soon enough. Vanessa kept looking around the room, trying to understand what was happening. Her eyes landed on me, and for the first time, she seemed to actually see what I was wearing. The Brooks Brothers navy suit, the silk tie, the Italian leather shoes, the Omega watch on my wrist, catching light from the window. Her forehead creased slightly. Where did the old man get clothes like that? Too late to ask questions now. "We are here today," Patricia began, her voice formal and measured, "to address the last will and testament of Terrence Eugene Monroe, deceased October 1st, 2024, at the age of 34. She opened the first folder. The will was executed January 20th of this year and witnessed by Marcus Washington and Janet Reeves, both present today. Vanessa leaned forward eagerly, ready to hear about all the money she'd inherit.
To my wife, Vanessa Monroe, I leave the contents of my personal savings account at First Capital Bank, currently valued at $15,200. Vanessa's smile started to fade. Just $15,000? I leave her my 2019 Toyota Camry, vehicle identification number. Patricia read off the numbers. The vehicle currently has 24 monthly payments remaining, totaling $8,400. The smile disappeared completely. A car with payments? I leave to Vanessa my personal clothing, books, electronics, and any items purchased jointly during our marriage as documented in Appendix A. Patricia flipped through pages. The total estate value for Vanessa Monroe is assessed at $23,100 less the remaining car payments. The room went silent except for papers rustling. One of the commercial tenants, the coffee shop owner, leaned over and whispered to the boutique manager, loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's it? I thought she'd be getting way more than that." Vanessa's face flushed red. "Wait, what?" Patricia continued reading like she hadn't heard the interruption. All other assets, properties, and financial holdings remain outside the scope of this will as they were never owned by the deceased. "That's impossible," Vanessa's voice rose. "What about the house? What about his life insurance? He had a $500,000 policy. I know because I'm the one who helped him sign up for it." Gladys from next door let out a small laugh, then tried to cover it with a cough. Vanessa's head whipped toward her. Patricia set down the will and picked up another document. She adjusted her reading glasses. The life insurance was purchased through Mr. Terrence Monroe's employer-sponsored program at Sentinel Life Insurance. However, according to records obtained from Sentinel, the beneficiary designation was changed 8 months ago. She slid a document across the table toward Vanessa. Changed on January 15th of this year with Mr. Terrence Monroe's notarized signature witnessed by Marcus Washington. The change was made from Vanessa Monroe to Marshall Eugene Monroe. The room went dead silent. Then Gladys laughed again, louder this time, no attempt to hide it. "I knew it," she said, slapping the table. "I told my husband something was off about that girl." Vanessa's face turned bright red. "That's not possible. He would have told me. He wouldn't. There's no way." "We have the signed form right here," Patricia said calmly. "The change was made shortly after Mr. Monroe discovered certain financial irregularities in the joint checking account he shared with you." I watched Vanessa's hands start shaking as she stared at the beneficiary change form. She knew exactly what Patricia meant by irregularities. Marcus stood up slowly. "I was there when he changed it, January 15th. Terrence came to Patricia's office at lunch, and I witnessed the signature." He looked directly at Vanessa. "You want to know what he said to me in the parking lot afterwards? He said, 'Marcus, I love her, but I can't trust her anymore. If something happens to me, I need to know my dad will be taken care of.'" Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "He knew," Marcus continued, voice shaking. "He knew. He knew about the credit cards you opened in his name. He knew about the money you were transferring out of their account. He knew, and he still tried to make it work because he loved her." "That's enough," Patricia said, but her tone suggested she didn't really mean it. The coffee shop owner whispered again, louder. "Wait, she was stealing from him while he was alive?" "Allegedly," the boutique manager whispered back, "but it sounds pretty proven to me." Vanessa shot to her feet. "This is bullshit. You're all ganging up on me. My husband just died 9 days ago," Keisha, the property manager, said quietly. "He died 9 days ago, and you kicked his father out 1 hour after the funeral." The room's energy shifted. Everyone was staring at Vanessa now, and the judgment was written on every face. "Mrs. Monroe," Patricia said firmly, "please sit down. We're not finished." "I don't want to." "Sit down." Vanessa sat down. Patricia opened the thickest folder yet. "As for the house, that brings us to the primary reason for today's gathering. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Don't miss what happens when she realizes who she just messed with. Stay until the end."
Mrs. Monroe, you've taken possession of the property at 2847 Sycamore Avenue and claimed ownership based on your marriage to the deceased. Is that correct? Patricia's voice carried the tone of an attorney who already knew the answer and was enjoying the setup. It's not claimed, it is mine. Vanessa's voice was sharp, defensive. Spousal inheritance rights, Virginia law. That house belongs to me. Patricia's expression didn't change. Could you please show me the property deed for 2847 Sycamore Avenue? Vanessa blanked. What? The deed. The legal document showing property ownership. Surely you reviewed it before claiming the property was yours. The color started draining from Vanessa's face. It was in Terrence's name. Obviously. We lived there for 3 years. He paid the mortgage every month. Actually, Patricia said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice, he paid rent. There is no mortgage on 2847 Sycamore Avenue. She pulled out an official document with county seals and stamps, laid it flat on the table where everyone could see. The property was purchased outright in March 1997 for $180,000 cash by Magnolia Properties LLC, a limited liability company registered in Virginia. She slid the document across the table. It stopped directly in front of Vanessa. The sole owner and operator of Magnolia Properties LLC is Mr. Marshall Eugene Monroe. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then the room absolutely erupted. Gladys burst out laughing, full, deep belly laughs. 30 years! 30 years I've lived next door, wondering how Marshall afforded that house on a handyman's salary, and it's because he owned it the whole time. Marcus dropped his head into his hands, shoulders shaking. When he looked up, he was grinning. Uncle Marshall, you've been hiding in plain sight for decades. The coffee shop owner stood up to get a better look at the deed. Wait, Magnolia Properties? That's who owns our building downtown. That's you! The boutique manager gasped. You're our landlord? Terrence's dad is our landlord? We've been paying rent to you for 6 years? Janet Reeves from the bank opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been Mr. Monroe's business banker since 1995. Would you like to know how much property he actually owns? Yes, Gladys practically shouted. Tell us everything. Vanessa was sitting frozen, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, shock, then landing on pure horror. Mr. Marshall Monroe, Janet said, clearly enjoying herself, currently maintains business accounts totaling approximately $4.7 million in liquid assets. His monthly rental income from 12 residential properties across Richmond averages $18,000 a month. Someone in the room gasped. Might have been Dion. $18,000 a month? The coffee shop owner repeated. That's more than I make in a year. That's more than most people make in a year, the boutique manager added. Janet wasn't finished. He also owns 2 commercial buildings on East Broad Street, she gestured to the tenants, where these fine people rent their business spaces. 1 storage facility complex on Jefferson Davis Highway, and multiple investment accounts that have been growing steadily since the 1990s. Keisha Brown wheeled her cart forward. I've been managing Mr. Monroe's residential properties for 10 years. Every property is immaculate. Every tenant is properly screened. Every rent payment is documented. She started pulling out binders and spreading them across the table. These are maintenance records for 2847 Sycamore Avenue alone. New water heater in 2019, Mr. Monroe paid $700. Roof repair in 2020, $3,000. HVAC replacement in 2022, $8,000. She looked at Vanessa. How much did you contribute to property maintenance in 3 years of living there? Vanessa's mouth opened. No sound came out. I'll answer for you. 0. You contributed exactly $0 to property maintenance because you weren't the owner. You were barely even a tenant. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Let me make sure I understand this. Vanessa kicked Uncle Marshall out of his own house thinking she owned it, when actually he's a multi-millionaire who's been quietly accumulating wealth for 40 years? That's correct, Patricia said. And she did this 1 hour after the funeral? Also correct. Marcus shook his head slowly. That might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard anyone do. And I work in finance. I've seen some really dumb financial decisions. Several people laughed. Vanessa looked like she might be sick. The boutique manager raised her hand like she was in school. "Can I say something?" "Go ahead," Patricia said. "I've rented from Mr. Monroe for 6 years. He's never raised my rent. Not once. When COVID hit and my revenue dropped 80%, he cut my rent in half for 6 months until I recovered. When my pipes burst last winter, he had a plumber there in 2 hours." The coffee shop owner nodded. "Same experience. Best landlord I've ever had. Your husband," she looked at Vanessa, "used to help with repairs sometimes. Really kind guy. Always talked about how proud he was of his father. Said his father taught him everything about working hard and treating people right. Tyon helped fix our plumbing 2 years ago. Spent a whole Saturday with Mr. Monroe getting our bathroom back to code. Never mentioned his father owned the building. I just thought it was 2 handymen working together." Vanessa found her voice. "This is insane. You're all lying. He's just an old man in Walmart clothes driving a beat-up Honda. He doesn't have millions of dollars. This is some kind of scam." I stood up slowly, took off my suit jacket and laid it across the back of my chair, rolled up my shirt sleeve to show the Omega Seamaster watch. This watch cost $8,000. I bought it in 2009. You saw me wear it every Sunday for 3 years and never asked about it. I walked to the head of the table and placed a business card in front of her. Faded, old, but still legible. Marshall Monroe, Anderson Development Group, Commercial Real Estate Development. This was my business card from 1995 to 2010, before I semi-retired, before I decided to spend more time with Terrence and less time managing construction projects. I pulled out my wallet and set 3 credit cards on the table. All heavy metal cards. American Express Platinum, Chase Sapphire Reserve, and Bank of America Premium Rewards. These aren't the credit cards of someone living on Social Security alone. Vanessa stared at the cards like they might bite her. "You saw what you wanted to see, Vanessa, an old man in simple clothes. You never asked why I drove the same car for 17 years. Might have learned it's because I maintain my vehicles and don't believe in waste. Never asked why I seemed so comfortable managing repairs. Might have learned I owned the property." I leaned forward slightly. "You made assumptions, Vanessa. And those assumptions are about to cost you everything."
"That's impossible. You're just an old handyman." Vanessa's voice cracked as she stared at the property deed, the credit cards, the watch. Her face had gone from red to pale to a sickly gray color. Patricia wasn't finished. Mr. Terrence Monroe was listed as the leaseholder at 2847 Sycamore Avenue. He paid monthly rent of $1,200 to Magnolia Properties, LLC. The lease agreement, signed in 2017, explicitly specified that his father would reside at the property with him. She pulled out the lease and held it up. "Your husband's signature is right here. He knew the arrangement. He knew his father owned the property." Marcus nodded. "Terrence told me about it once, maybe 2 years ago. Said his dad owned the house but let him manage it, let him feel independent. Said it was his father's way of teaching him responsibility while still having a safety net." Vanessa grabbed the lease with shaking hands, scanned it frantically, found Terrence's signature at the bottom. "He knew? He knew the whole time and never told me?" "Why would he tell you?" Gladys asked. "You never asked. Too busy planning how to spend money that wasn't yours." Janet Reeves cleared her throat. "Mrs. Monroe, I need to inform you that First Capital Bank has been reviewing the activity on the joint checking account you shared with Terrence. Our fraud detection team has flagged several concerning transactions." "What transactions?" "Unauthorized credit cards opened in Mr. Terrence Monroe's name. 3 different cards from 3 different banks. Total balance of $23,000. The signatures on the applications don't match Mr. Monroe's signature on file with our bank." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "Those weren't unauthorized. That was our money." "Actually, no." Janet spread documents across the table. "The account was opened by Terrence Monroe in 2019, 2 years before your marriage. You were added as an authorized user in 2021, but primary ownership remains solely in his name." She pointed to specific line items. "These transfers to your personal accounts, $18,000 over 14 months? Did Terrence explicitly authorize each one?" "We shared money. That's what married couples do." "These cash advances? Did he know about them?" Silence. The coffee shop owner leaned over to the boutique manager.
Is she seriously admitting to stealing from her husband right now? I think she is, the boutique manager whispered back. Marcus stood up, hands flat on the table. Just admit it, Vanessa. You stole from him. You lied to him. And when he started getting suspicious, when he changed that life insurance beneficiary, you... He stopped himself, jaw clenching. Patricia stepped in smoothly. We've also been in contact with Sentinel Life Insurance. They're opening an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Mr. Terrence Monroe's death, specifically the timing of the policy increase you encouraged him to make 6 months prior. Vanessa's face went pale. He had a heart attack. That's not suspicious. It just happened. Actually, Marcus said, voice shaking now, it's extremely suspicious. Terrence was 34 and healthy, had a physical in June that came back perfect. The only thing that changed was he started complaining about feeling tired, dizzy, weak, his hands shaking. It started right around the time Vanessa began making him those special protein shakes every morning for his health, she said, to boost his energy, every single morning. The room went dead silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Dion stood abruptly. I need to leave. Sit down, Mr. Johnson, Patricia said firmly. You're named in several witness statements regarding your presence at the property prior to Mr. Monroe's death. Gladys raised her hand. I have photographs of his truck parked down the street, dated 3 months worth, including 2 instances where I saw him entering the house while Terrence was at work. Dion sat back down slowly, face ashen. Patricia continued. The medical examiner's initial report listed sudden cardiac arrest as cause of death. However, given the circumstances that have come to light, we've requested a comprehensive toxicology screening. The results are pending. You can't prove anything, Vanessa said, but her voice had lost all strength. You're trying to take everything from me. What's rightfully yours is exactly what my son left you in his will. I walked slowly around the table toward her, not threatening, just present. $15,000 in savings, a car with 24 payments remaining, his personal belongings. That's it. That's what's rightfully yours. Vanessa was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. I have receipts going back decades. I pulled out a folder and dropped it on the table. The dishes in the cabinets, the curtains on the windows, the $15,000 worth of professional tools in the shed you had Dion lock up, all mine. She flinched at the tool value, probably because Dion had been using those tools to build a deck last week, thinking they were junk from Harbor Freight. You have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings and vacate the premises. If you're not out by Monday at noon, I will have the sheriff's department remove you forcibly. I will pursue trespassing charges. Do you understand me? Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Vanessa, but I'm sure you'll figure something out. After all, you're resourceful. I picked up my suit jacket. You spent $23,000 of my son's money without him noticing for almost a year. You convinced him to increase his life insurance to $500,000. You moved your boyfriend into his house before we'd even ordered the headstone. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. That small smile I gave you Tuesday, when you gave me 1 hour to pack up my life and leave my own house, I let myself smile again. The same smile that confused her. That was me knowing you'd just made the biggest mistake of your life. You could have been kind. You could have grieved with me. You could have honored my son's memory. I looked around the room at all the witnesses. Instead, you showed everyone exactly who you are. Gladys started a slow clap. Actually clapping. Then Marcus joined in. Then the commercial tenants. Then Janet and Keisha. Vanessa sat there in her red dress, mascara-streaked face, watching a room full of people applaud her humiliation. Patricia handed me a folder of documents. I'll have the formal eviction notice delivered tomorrow morning by certified mail. And Marshall, Detective Raymond Hughes from Richmond PD will contact you Monday about the investigation. As I walked out, I could hear Vanessa sobbing. Hear Dion trying to calm her with words that rang hollow. Hear someone in the room say, "Did that really just happen?" Yes, it really just happened. And by Monday morning, everyone in Richmond was going to know about it.
Mrs. Monroe, do you understand what you've just been served? Patricia's voice cut through Vanessa's sobs. She was still at the table, mascara streaking her face.
Dion's arm around her shoulders, doing nothing to comfort her. "This isn't legal. You can't just... I live there. I have rights." "You have squatter's rights at best," Patricia said coldly, "which in Virginia requires 18 years of occupation plus payment of all taxes and fees. You've done neither." Janet Reeves pulled out another folder. "Mrs. Monroe, I need to inform you that First Capital Bank has frozen the joint checking account pending investigation. The fraud detection team has documented unauthorized transactions spanning 14 months." "Those weren't unauthorized. That was my money too." "Actually, no." Janet spread documents across the table. "The account was opened by Terrence Monroe in 2019, 2 years before your marriage. You were added as an authorized user in 2021, but the account ownership remained solely in his name. Every transaction requires documented consent from the primary account holder." She pointed to specific line items. "These transfers to your personal accounts. Did Terrence authorize them?" Vanessa's jaw tightened. "We shared money. That's what married couples do." "These credit card applications? Did you forge his signature?" "I didn't forge anything." Janet pulled out another document. "This is Terrence's signature from his driver's license application. This is the signature on the credit card paperwork. According to our fraud analysis, the variance suggests different individuals signed these documents." Marcus leaned forward. "Just admit it, Vanessa. You stole from him. You lied to him. You probably killed him." "I didn't kill anyone." Her voice cracked. "He had a heart attack. That's not my fault." "Then why did you push so hard for the life insurance increase? Why did you insist he drink those shakes every morning? Why were you already moving Dion in before we'd even buried him?" Dion stood abruptly. "I don't need to listen to this." "Sit down, Mr. Johnson." Patricia's tone left no room for argument. "You're named in several witness statements regarding your presence at the property prior to Mr. Monroe's death. Richmond PD will want to speak with you as well." Dion sat back down slowly. Keisha Brown, the property manager, opened one of her binders. "I have documentation of every maintenance request at 2847 Sycamore Avenue for the past 10 years. Mr. Monroe, Marshall Monroe, approved and paid for every repair personally. New water heater in 2019, $700. Roof repair in 2020, $3,000. HVAC replacement in 2022, $8,000. She slid receipts across the table. "Mrs. Monroe, you've contributed exactly $0 to property maintenance in 3 years of residence. You're not the owner. You're not even a responsible tenant." One of the commercial tenants spoke up, the coffee shop owner from East Broad Street. "I've been renting for Mr. Monroe for 8 years. He's the most professional landlord I've ever worked with. Fair rent, quick repairs, reasonable lease terms. Your husband came by with some plumbing work 2 years ago. Really nice guy. Never mentioned his father owned the building." The boutique manager nodded. "Same here. Mr. Monroe's been my landlord for 6 years. Never raised my rent, helped me through COVID when revenue dropped. Your husband came by several times to fix things. Always professional, always kind. I'm sorry for your loss, but his father deserves respect, not this." Vanessa looked around the table at all these people validating Marshall's story. Her face was pale, trapped by accumulating evidence. Patricia wasn't finished. "Detective Raymond Hughes from Richmond PD will be contacting you within 48 hours. He specializes in financial fraud and suspicious deaths. I suggest you retain legal counsel." "I can't afford a lawyer. You just took everything from me." "We didn't take anything from you," I said quietly from my position near the door. "We're taking back what was always ours. There's a difference." Gladys spoke for the first time. "I've lived next to that house for 30 years. Watched Marshall raise Terrence from a baby. Saw him work 3 jobs to keep that boy fed and clothed after his wife died. You've been there 3 years and treated him like garbage." She leaned forward. "I heard you Tuesday, through the walls. laughing while you kicked him out. You want to know what I think? I think you got exactly what you deserved." Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went even paler. "What is it?" Dion asked. "The life insurance company. They want to schedule an interview about irregularities in the claim." Patricia made a note. "They work fast when fraud is suspected." "This is insane! You're all ganging up on me! My husband just died, and you're treating me like a criminal!" "If it looks like fraud, smells like fraud, and documents like fraud." Marcus let the sentence hang. Vanessa grabbed her purse and stood. "I'm leaving. I don't have to listen to this." "You have 72 hours, Patricia said. "The eviction notice will be delivered tomorrow morning. If you're not out by Monday at noon, you will be removed by force. Any property left behind becomes abandoned and will be disposed of." "You can't." "I can, and I will. This meeting is concluded." Vanessa stormed out, Dion scrambling to follow. Through the window, I watched them argue on the sidewalk before climbing into his truck and speeding away. The room exhaled collectively. Marcus turned to me. "Uncle Marshall, why didn't you tell us? About the properties, the money, everything." "Because I wanted Terrence to build his own life, make his own success. I didn't want my money to become his crutch. But if he'd known, maybe he wouldn't have married her. Maybe he'd still be alive." That thought had haunted me for weeks. Maybe, or maybe this was always going to happen, and at least now she won't profit from his death. Patricia began gathering documents. "The toxicology report should be back next week. If it shows what I think it will, this becomes a homicide investigation. And if it doesn't, then she's still facing fraud charges, identity theft, and eviction. She's not walking away clean." As people filed out, each stopped to speak with me, offering condolences, expressing shock at the revelations, promising to testify if needed. Gladys was last. She hugged me tight. "Terrence would be proud of you, Marshall, standing up for yourself like this. I should have stood up for him sooner." "Don't do that. You loved your boy. You did right by him. She's the one who failed." After everyone left, I stood alone in Patricia's conference room, looking at the documents spread across the table. Evidence of 40 years building something substantial. Evidence of Vanessa's betrayal. Evidence that justice, real justice, sometimes takes patience. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Monroe, this is Detective Raymond Hughes with Richmond PD. I'd like to schedule a time to discuss your son's death." "When?" How about Monday morning, after Mrs. Monroe vacates the property?" Monday works. Justice was coming. Slowly, methodically, with the full weight of evidence behind it. Exactly the way it should.
Tell me about the protein shakes. Detective Raymond Hughes sat across from me Monday morning in an interview room at Richmond PD. Vanessa had moved out Sunday night, 2 hours before the deadline. Took her clothes and left everything else behind. Vanessa started making them for Terrence around April, said they'd help his energy levels. And that's when the symptoms started? Within 2 weeks. Tired all the time, dizzy, weak. His hands would shake. I looked at the detective. My son was 34 and healthy. Had a physical in June that came back perfect. Hughes made notes. The medical examiner found elevated levels of digoxin in his system, heart medication he was never prescribed. How much? Enough to cause cardiac arrest over time. Small doses that built up, made him sick gradually, then killed him when the levels got high enough. He looked up. "We executed a search warrant on Mrs. Monroe's vehicle yesterday, found a prescription bottle in her glove compartment. Belonged to her grandmother, Gladys Spencer, who died 2 years ago from congestive heart failure. She'd been on digoxin for years." My hands tightened on the table. She kept her dead grandmother's medication? And apparently administered it to your son over several months. The medical examiner thinks she was dissolving it in those shakes, Low doses at first, enough to make him feel sick, but not enough to trigger immediate alarm. Then larger doses as time went on. The room felt smaller, suddenly. Colder. She murdered him. That's what the evidence suggests. We're coordinating with the DA's office on charges. Voluntary manslaughter at minimum, possibly first-degree murder, depending on how much premeditation we can prove. The life insurance increase. She pushed for that in April, same time the shakes started. Hughes nodded. That establishes motive and timeline. We're also looking at the credit card fraud, the unauthorized transfers, the boyfriend who moved in immediately after his death. It all paints a picture of someone who wanted her husband dead for financial gain. When will she be arrested? Tomorrow morning. We're finalizing paperwork today. She'll be charged with voluntary manslaughter, insurance fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. That last one applies to you, given how she treated you immediately following your son's death. I sat back, letting it sink in. Justice arriving not with drama or spectacle, but with quiet, methodical police work and medical evidence. What happens now? She'll be arraigned Wednesday. Given the severity of charges, I expect bail to be set high, $500,000, maybe more. Without access to the life insurance money, she probably can't make it. So she sits in jail until trial. Most likely. Trial won't start for at least a year. Our case is strong, but her attorney will request continuances, file motions, try every legal trick to delay. Hughes closed his notebook. Mr. Monroe, I need to ask, why didn't you tell anyone about your financial situation, about owning the house? It would have saved you a lot of grief. Because I wanted my son to build his own life, make his own success without depending on my father's money. I looked at the detective. I thought I was teaching him self-reliance. Instead, I left him vulnerable to someone who saw him as a payday. You couldn't have known. I suspected, saw signs. The credit cards, the money transfers, the boyfriend's truck. I suspected, and I stayed quiet because I didn't want to interfere in his marriage. My voice cracked. That silence might have cost him his life. Hughes was quiet for a moment. Mr. Monroe, I've been doing this 23 years, seen a lot of families torn apart by money and greed. What you did, building wealth quietly, trying to let your son find his own way, that came from love. What she did came from something else entirely. Doesn't bring him back. No. But it means his death won't be unpunished, and his memory won't be defined by her actions. After the interview, I drove to Sycamore Avenue, my house. Empty now, except for the furniture I'd bought decades ago and the memories embedded in every wall. I walked through each room slowly. Terrence's childhood bedroom, where I'd read him stories at night. The kitchen, where I'd taught him to make my grandmother's pound cake. The living room, where we'd watch football every Sunday. The house smelled like fresh paint and bleach, Vanessa's attempts to clean before leaving. But underneath that chemical smell, I could still find traces of my son. His laugh in the corners, his presence in the walls. My phone rang. Marcus. Uncle Marshall, I heard they're arresting her tomorrow. That's what Detective Hughes said. How do you feel? I sat on the front porch steps, Terrence's pottery mug in my hands. Tired, sad, angry that it took his death to reveal the truth. Grateful that at least there will be justice. He'd be proud of you. For standing up to her, for making sure she didn't get away with it. He'd be alive if I'd stood up to her sooner. Don't torture yourself with that. You didn't know. None of us did. But that was the weight I would carry forever. The what-ifs and maybes. The moments when I'd suspected something wrong and stayed quiet out of respect for his choices. Marcus, I'm turning this house into something meaningful. A resource center for people dealing with loss. Free counseling, legal aid, financial planning. Want to help me run it? Named after Terrence? The Terrence Monroe Resource Center. So his name means something beyond how he died. I'm in, whatever you need. After we hung up, I sat on that porch as afternoon turned to evening, talking to Terrence like I used to when he was young. Telling him about the investigation, the arrest coming tomorrow, the justice finally arriving, about transforming this house, our house, into something that would help others the way I wished someone had helped him. The wind rustled through the oak trees lining Sycamore Avenue, and for just a moment, I heard that laugh again. Not at Vanessa's downfall, because Terrence had a kind heart even when it got him hurt, but at the beautiful irony of it all. His father, the man everyone underestimated, had been the one holding all the cards the entire time. Patient enough to wait, strong enough to act, loving enough to turn tragedy into purpose. I miss you, son, I said to the evening air. The wind answered, carrying memories and promises and the weight of justice finally arriving where it belonged.
Girl, how did you keep that secret for 30 years? Gladys called me Sunday evening. Vanessa and Dion were loading the last boxes into their U-Haul, racing the Monday noon deadline by 12 hours. By being underestimated, I said. Well, she sure underestimated you. And guess what? She's not the only one who knows about it now. What do you mean? Marshall, it's all over Facebook. The Richmond Community Forum has a thread with 400 comments. Someone who was at the will reading posted about it. Didn't use names, but described the whole thing. People are trying to figure out who it was. I looked out the window at Vanessa struggling with a box. Dion checking his phone every 30 seconds like he was already planning his exit strategy. What are they saying? Mostly that the woman got what she deserved. Some people are calling it the best real-life revenge story they've ever heard. A few are saying you should have just told her from the start, but most are on your side. One of the sheriff's deputies supervising the move walked over to me. Mr. Monroe, they're almost done. 30 more minutes, max. I thanked him and watched Vanessa carry another box to the truck. She looked different now. The designer clothes were gone, just jeans and a t-shirt. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by the defeated shuffle of someone whose entire world had collapsed in 72 hours. Mrs. Monroe, the deputy called out, you've got 25 minutes. Anything left behind becomes Mr. Monroe's property. She nodded without looking up. My phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Uncle Marshall, you're trending on the Richmond subreddit. Someone posted the whole story. No names, but people are figuring it out. Then another text from the coffee shop owner. Mr. Monroe, I've had 6 customers today ask if I know anything about that will reading story. Your secret's out. Gladys was still on the phone. There's more. Someone posted in the comments that they used to work with Terrence. Said he was the nicest guy, always talking about his dad. Said it's disgusting what she did. How do people know it's about us? They don't know for sure, but it's Richmond, Marshall. People talk. And when a story involves Monument Avenue law offices, a multi-million-dollar property portfolio, and a father-in-law being kicked out after a funeral, people connect dots. Vanessa loaded the final box. Dion closed the truck door. They stood there looking at the house, my house, for a long moment. The deputy checked his clipboard. All personal items removed? Everything, Dion said. Then we're done here. Mrs. Monroe, you're officially evicted from 2847 Sycamore Avenue. If you return without written permission from Mr. Monroe, you'll be arrested for trespassing. Do you understand? I understand. They climbed into the truck. Before starting the engine, Vanessa looked at me one last time. I stood in the doorway of my house, wearing my simple clothes again, looking exactly like the poor old man she'd dismissed. Except now, she knew the truth. And soon, so would everyone else. The truck pulled away. As it turned the corner, I saw Vanessa's hand come up to her face, crying again. Gladys appeared on her porch next door, waving. Marshall, Channel 12 called asking if I'd comment on a story about a Richmond property owner and a will reading. I said no comment, but honey, they're digging. By Monday morning, Patricia called. "Marshall, I've had 3 reporters contact my office for Friday's proceedings. They're calling it the Richmond Revenge Story. One of them wants to interview you." "No interviews." "That's what I told them, but heads up, the DA's office called. The toxicology report came back Friday afternoon. I was waiting until Monday to tell you." My hand tightened on the phone. What did it show? Elevated digoxin levels consistent with poisoning over months. Detective Hughes is moving forward with charges. They're arresting Vanessa tomorrow morning. What charges? Voluntary manslaughter, insurance fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. After we hung up, I walked through the empty house. Every room echoed now. Vanessa had taken her cheap furniture and left behind the quality pieces I'd bought decades ago. My phone buzzed constantly. Text messages from church members, neighbors, people I hadn't talked to in years, all asking the same question. Is it true? Marcus showed up that afternoon with printouts. "Uncle Marshall, you need to see this." He spread them across the kitchen table. Screenshots from Facebook, Reddit, and Twitter. The story had gone viral in Richmond. Someone posted the full timeline, from the funeral to the will reading to the eviction. "They're calling you the patient millionaire. There's already memes." Memes? He showed me his phone. Someone had created an image macro. "When she kicks you out of your own house," over a picture of someone smiling mysteriously. Another one, "POV, you just found out the poor old man you evicted owns 12 properties." "This is insane," I said. "It's viral justice, Marcus. People love stories where the underdog wins, and you, Uncle Marshall, are the ultimate underdog." By Tuesday, the arrest made the news. Channel 12 ran a story. Richmond woman arrested in husband's death. Property dispute may be connected. They didn't use names, but mentioned the will reading, the multi-million-dollar revelation, and the pending homicide investigation. Gladys called again. "Marshall, Vanessa's name is in the arrest records. Public information. People have connected all the dots now. There's a Facebook group called Justice for Terrence with 800 members." A Facebook group? People are posting their own stories about greedy relatives, about being underestimated, about patient revenge. Your story sparked something. Wednesday, I got a letter. Hand-delivered by a young woman who introduced herself as Brittany, a reporter for Richmond Magazine. "Mr. Monroe, I know you're not doing interviews, but I wanted you to know your story is inspiring people. I've received 40 emails from readers sharing how they've been underestimated, how they've had relatives try to take advantage, how they found strength in patience." She handed me the letter. "This is from a widow whose late husband's in-laws tried to take her house. Your story gave her courage to fight back. She won. I thought you'd want to know." After she left, I sat on the porch with Terrence's pottery mug and read the letter. The widow described how her late husband's family had assumed she was helpless, how she had quietly documented everything, how she had revealed the truth when the time was right. "Your son would be proud, not because you got revenge, but because you turned tragedy into a lesson everyone needed to hear." The wind picked up, rustling the oak trees. For a moment, I heard that laugh again. Terrence's laugh, full of joy. Not at Vanessa's downfall, but at the idea that his death, as horrible as it was, had somehow inspired strangers to stand up for themselves. That his name, Terrence Eugene Monroe, would be remembered not for how he died, but for the justice that came after. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth something.
"Mr. Monroe, we're making the arrest tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Detective Hughes called me Tuesday evening. I was sitting in Terrence's old bedroom, sorting through things Vanessa had left behind. Photos of my son I'd thought were lost forever. "What are the charges?" "Voluntary manslaughter for your son's death, insurance fraud for the policy manipulation, identity theft for the credit cards, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult for how she treated you after the funeral." I set down a photo of Terrence at his high school graduation. "How strong is the case?" "Very strong. The toxicology shows digoxin levels consistent with poisoning over several months.
We found the prescription bottle in her car. Belonged to her grandmother who died 2 years ago. Timeline matches perfectly with when your son started getting sick. The protein shakes. Almost certainly, medical examiner thinks she was dissolving the pills in his morning drinks. Low doses at first, then increasing amounts until it killed him. She was methodical about it. Methodical. The word hung in the air like poison itself. We also have the credit card fraud documented. $23,000 in unauthorized charges, the banks cooperating fully. And the life insurance increase she pushed for in April, right when the poisoning started, establishes clear motive. What about Dion, the boyfriend? We're still investigating his involvement. So far, no evidence he knew about the poisoning, but he definitely knew about the affair, and he moved in immediately after he died. We might charge him as an accessory after the fact, depending on what we find. After Hughes hung up, I called Marcus. They're arresting her tomorrow. Good. His voice was tight. She deserves everything that's coming. Marcus, I need to ask you something. Did Terrence ever suspect? Did he know she might be poisoning him? Silence on the other end. He called me in September, 3 weeks before he died. Said he was feeling worse and something felt wrong. Said Vanessa kept insisting he drink the shakes, kept saying they'd help, but he was getting sicker instead of better. What did you tell him? I told him to see a doctor, get blood work done. He said he would. Marcus's voice broke. He died before he could make the appointment. We sat with that for a moment. The terrible nearness of it. 3 weeks away from discovering the truth. 3 weeks away from maybe saving his life. It's not your fault, I said. Feels like it is. Feels like all of us should have seen it sooner. She counted on that. Counted on us loving him enough to be blind to what she was doing. After we hung up, I walked through the house one more time, touching walls, remembering, grieving for the son I'd lost and the justice that had arrived too late to save him. My phone buzzed. Text from Patricia. Arrest warrant signed. She'll be in custody by morning. I sat on the porch as darkness fell over Richmond, holding Terrence's pottery mug, talking to the evening air and the memories it carried. Justice is coming, son. Won't bring you back, but at least she won't profit from what she did. At least your death won't be meaningless. The wind answered, rustling leaves, carrying the weight of what tomorrow would bring. Wednesday morning, Patricia called at 7. She's in custody, arrested at her mother's house an hour ago. She's being transported to Richmond for arraignment this afternoon. How did she react? According to the officers, she claimed innocence, said it was all a misunderstanding, said you were making this up because you were angry about the eviction. And they believed her? They showed her the toxicology report, the prescription bottle they found in her car, the timeline of the poisoning matching when she started making those shakes. She stopped talking after that, requested a lawyer. Wednesday arraignment. 3 o'clock today. Judge Martinez is presiding. I expect bail to be set high given the severity, probably $500,000 minimum. I drove to the courthouse that afternoon, sat in the back row during the arraignment, watched Vanessa in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, standing before the judge while charges were read. Voluntary manslaughter in the death of Terrence Eugene Monroe, insurance fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, for how she treated you after the funeral. Her public defender argued for reasonable bail, claimed she wasn't a flight risk, had ties to the community, deserved presumption of innocence. The prosecutor countered with the evidence, the poisoning timeline, the life insurance motive, the immediate eviction of the victim's father, and the boyfriend moving in before the body was cold. If you believe the underestimated deserve their moment, subscribe. More stories like this coming. Judge Martinez set bail at $750,000. Vanessa's face crumpled when she heard the number. Her mother in the front row gasped. The public defender shook his head. They both knew she couldn't make that bail without access to the life insurance money, which meant she'd sit in jail until trial. Could be a year or more. As they led her away, she looked back and saw me sitting there. For just a moment, our eyes met. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked at her with the calm certainty of someone who'd been patient enough to wait for justice and strong enough to see it through.
She looked away first.
Mr. Monroe, we have someone here who could really use your help. 3 months after Vanessa's arrest, I stood in what used to be Terrence's bedroom. Now it was an office where volunteers provided free legal aid to people dealing with loss. Marcus was at the door with a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25. She was holding a folder of papers and looked lost. "Come in," I said. "What's your name?" Keisha Johnson." She sat down, hands trembling. "My husband died 3 weeks ago. His family's trying to take everything. They said I have no rights because we were only married a year. I don't know what to do." I called over Patricia, who'd volunteered to run our legal aid program 2 afternoons a week. Watched them sit together, Keisha's papers spread across the table, Patricia explaining property rights and inheritance law in language anyone could understand. This was what we'd built, the Terrence Monroe Resource Center. 3 months of transforming grief into purpose. The house on Sycamore Avenue wasn't a rental property anymore. The living room was a meeting space with comfortable couches arranged in circles. The kitchen hosted grief support groups and cooking classes for people learning to cook for 1 instead of 2. Terrence's old bedroom, where Patricia was now helping Keisha, offered free legal aid and financial planning. On the wall above the meeting space hung a large photograph of Terrence. His college graduation, grinning at the camera, with his whole face looking exactly like the joyful man he'd been before Vanessa. Below the photo, mounted in a shadow box, was the chipped blue pottery mug he'd made me in middle school. A reminder that the smallest gestures of love outlast everything else. My phone buzzed. Text from Gladys. "Brandon got Employee of the Month at the storage facility. Thank you for giving him that chance." Gladys Thompson, Brandon's grandson. Good kid who'd been struggling to find steady work after community college. I'd hired him to manage the storage facility in November. Within a month, he'd reorganized the filing system and increased occupancy 15%. That's what money was supposed to do. Create opportunities, build futures, help people who just needed someone to believe in them. The commercial tenants downtown had expanded too. The coffee shop hired 3 new employees, the boutique opened a second location, 8 new jobs total, in a neighborhood that needed economic development. And Vanessa? She was still in jail. Couldn't make the $750,000 bail. Trial was scheduled for next fall, almost a year away. Her public defender had tried negotiating a plea deal. The DA refused. The evidence was too strong, the crime too calculated. They wanted a trial and a conviction that would send a message. Marcus walked over after Keisha and Patricia finished their session. "That's the 15th person we've helped this week. 15 families who won't get taken advantage of the way Vanessa tried with you." Terrence would love this. Helping people. Making a real difference. He would. Marcus looked at the photo on the wall. "You know what I think about sometimes? How different things would have been if she'd just been kind. If she'd waited even a month before kicking you out. I probably would have helped her financially. Made sure she was okay." That's the tragedy of greed. It blinds you to the abundance that's already there. I looked at the 2 pottery mugs on my desk. Terrence's from 30 years ago. The new one Brandon Jr. had made me for my birthday last month, Gladys's great-grandson, an art student at VCU. Both chipped in their own ways, both perfectly imperfect, both priceless. But you know what, Marcus? Maybe it worked out the way it was supposed to. Because if Vanessa had been kind, none of this would exist. I gestured to the resource center around us. 15 families helped this week. Eventually hundreds, maybe thousands over the years. Maybe Terrence's death had to mean something bigger than just our personal loss. "Legacy," Marcus said quietly. "Legacy," I agreed. That evening, I sat alone in the resource center after everyone left. Terrence's photograph smiled down on me. His pottery mug sat on my desk next to the newer one. The house felt alive with purpose instead of heavy with grief. My phone rang.
Patricia. The trial date's been set. September 15th, next year. Judge Martinez again. How long will it take?
2 weeks, maybe 3. The DA's confident. They have the toxicology report, the prescription bottle, the timeline, the life insurance motive, the credit card fraud. It's overwhelming evidence. And if she's convicted? Voluntary manslaughter carries 5 to 15 years in Virginia. With the aggravating factors, the premeditation, the financial motive, the exploitation of you after his death, I'd expect her to get close to the maximum, maybe 12 to 15 years. After we hung up, I walked to the window, looked out at Sycamore Avenue, the street where I'd raised my son, where I'd watched him grow from a toddler to a man, where I'd lost him, and then found a way to honor his memory. Sometimes I thought about what would have happened if Vanessa had been different. If she'd let me grieve with her, if she'd honored Terrence's memory instead of erasing it for money, if she'd seen me as a person instead of an obstacle. Maybe I would have been the generous father-in-law she should have had. Maybe I would have used my resources to help her build a life. But she'd made her choice when she'd looked at a grieving father and saw nothing worth respecting. She'd made her choice when she'd given me 1 hour to leave. And I'd made mine when I'd smiled and walked away, knowing patience and truth would reveal everything. A young couple walked through the door. Late 20s, both looking exhausted and lost. "Is this the resource center?" the woman asked. "We just lost our daughter. She was only 6 months old. SIDS. And my husband's family is saying we should have... They're blaming us. We don't know how to..." "Come in," I said gently. "Sit down. You're in the right place." I called over one of our grief counselors, watched them settle into the couch, surrounded by people who understood loss and wouldn't judge them for it. This was the legacy, not the money or the properties or the revenge on someone who'd try to take what wasn't hers. The legacy was this: helping people when they were most vulnerable, creating space for grief without shame, offering resources without strings attached, turning the worst thing that ever happened to me into something that helped others. Because here's what I'd learned in my 72 years of life, building businesses, raising a son, and surviving loss and betrayal. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need expensive clothes or fancy cars or loud voices. It simply exists, quiet and patient, waiting for the moment when it's needed most. Real wealth isn't measured in dollars or properties or bank accounts. It's measured in the lives you touch, the communities you build, the legacy you leave when you're gone. And real justice isn't about revenge or punishment or making people suffer the way they made you suffer. Real justice is about truth. It's about patience, about gathering evidence and presenting your case and letting the facts speak for themselves. Real justice is taking the worst thing that ever happened and transforming it into something that helps others. Turning grief into purpose, honoring the dead by serving the living. If someone tries to make you feel small, remember this story. Real power doesn't shout, it whispers. And sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones nobody's paying attention to. My name is Marshall Eugene Monroe. I'm 72 years old. I'm a father who lost his son too soon. A landlord who built wealth quietly over decades. A man who was underestimated and used that underestimation to reveal truth when it mattered most. But more than any of that, I'm someone who learned the best revenge isn't destruction. It's creation. Building something beautiful from something broken. Turning loss into legacy. Teaching the next generation that real power comes not from what you take, but from what you give. The Terrence Monroe Resource Center stands on Sycamore Avenue in Richmore, Virginia. If you're grieving, if you've lost someone, if someone's trying to take advantage of you in your darkest hour, we're here. We're ready. And we'll help you find your way back. Because that's what Terrence would have wanted, and it's what I built from the ashes of the worst day of my life. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing that justice, real justice, is worth waiting for. And thank you for remembering that underneath every simple outfit, every old car, every quiet demeanor, there might be someone extraordinary, just waiting for the right moment to show you what they're really made of. Don't underestimate the underestimated. We've had decades to practice patience.
And when our moment comes, we don't waste it. This is my story. The story of how my daughter-in-law kicked me out of my own house 1 hour after my son's funeral, and how I taught her the most expensive lesson she'll ever learn. Not through cruelty or vindictiveness or revenge for revenge's sake, but through truth, through patience, through the quiet power of a man who knew his worth even when nobody else could see it. And through the transformation of tragedy into something that honors my son's memory every single day. Real power whispers, real wealth serves, real justice heals. And real love outlasts everything. Even death, even betrayal, even the worst thing that ever happened. Because love isn't what you feel. It's what you build when everything else is gone.